Coming up on Lawmakers, the Senate passes immigration legislation that would make it tougher for illegals to receive government assistance, while making businesses more accountable when they employ undocumented workers. The House and Senate agree on mid-year spending adjustments, and the House passes its version of the FY 2007 budget. And the official state crop was honored at the Capitol. We'll have the highlights of Peanut Butter and Jelly Day. Those stories and more are coming up next.
This is Lawmakers, your source for all the news from under the Gold Dome. Here are your anchors, Gerald Bryant and Nwandi Lawson.
Good evening, everyone. I'm David Zelski, filling in for Gerald Bryant. Also on Lawmakers, more revenue-sharing license plates could soon be on Georgia's roads.
And the Senate passes legislation that would allow private development by property owners within 150 feet of trout streams, but not within the state-required 50-foot buffer.
But our lead story tonight, the Senate passes immigration reform legislation. Today, the Senate passed a broad-ranging immigration compliance bill. Senate Bill 529 codifies how the state will enforce federal immigration law and how it will monitor state-offered benefits. Lawmakers Jesse Freeman joins us live from the Capitol with more. Jesse.
Well, David, the immigration issue has been as hotly debated as any this year, and today, SB 529 took a major step towards becoming law. After lengthy debate and several amendment offerings, the bill passed out of the Senate. For weeks, opposing sides of the immigration reform issue have squared off over Senate Bill 529.
This bill will do absolutely nothing to fix the real problem, and that's our broken immigration system. A system that rewards and benefits nearly every citizen and employer of this country at the expense of the undocumented immigrants.
This is nothing but a way to try to divide the country. Another form of hate. Another form of divisiveness.
The bill, offered by Senator Chip Rogers, touches many immigration issues, including how day laborers' taxes are monitored and the enforcement of state benefit requirements. Today, the bill was passed out of the Senate with plenty of concerned onlookers in the gallery. Democrats offered an amendment that would have constituted a floor substitute.
This is a national issue. This is a federal issue. But if we're going to do anything in Georgia, it needs to be meaningful. And that's what we are coming to you today with a proposal that we think is meaningful.
The bill itself provoked passionate debate.
I wish the federal government had protected our borders, but they have failed. I wish the state and local governments had used the powers granted them to discourage illegal immigration, but up until now they have not seen fit to do so.
These people are family-oriented. They're good people. They care about hard work, their families, and their Lord.
43% of non-citizens have no health insurance. That equals more than 9 million people.
What it does is it creates fear in the community. Now, I promise you that if you listen to Spanish talk show radio today, what you will hear about is this bill.
It's incumbent upon you to leave this place, to leave this Gold Dome, and get busy to start a movement on this issue, because 20 or 30 years from now, people who come with these kinds of pieces of legislation, you ain't going to see them.
If we had an endless supply of money, I'd be all for helping anybody who came here. If money was not an issue, if it grew on trees, if we just said, all right, help everybody that has a need, I'm all for that. But we don't have an endless supply of money.
In the end, the Democratic amendment was defeated, but the bill passed by a vote of 40-13. And two amendments were adopted onto the bill. One was a technical change offered by Senator Rogers, and the other was offered by Senator Emanuel Jones. That change would make contraband equipment used in printing false identification documents. The amended bill now goes over to the Senate. Reporting live, I'm Jesse Freeman for Lawmakers.
Well, the House today passed its 2007 budget. The House version of the governor's spending plan increases recommended allowance for nursing home residents and adds money for diabetes care and prevention. Appropriations Chair Ben Harbin pointed out that the House was also calling for more dental care for children and funding for the developmentally disabled.
Understand that it's in the budget again for, I think, the third time. It was in 06 amended, and now it's in 07. This is language just encouraging the Department of Community Health and their board to do what the legislature asked them to do last year with these preventive care under the Peach Care Plan, dental preventive care. This has not been implemented. We have put the funds in, but they have not implemented this. So when you see your board members in the Department of Community Health, mention to them that this body is waiting, but not much longer. 478, the Recommendation came with 750 waiver slots for consumers on mental retardation, developmental disabilities waiting lists. Well, we added an additional 750. They were funded at 6 months. We have moved that funding to 9 months. We have over 6,000 people on this MRDD waiting list. About 1,187 is the number it grew by last year. So 1,500 allows us to start bringing off more than what are coming on, so we can get this thing down to a manageable figure. Because if we don't, it's going to continue to grow, and we won't be able to handle it, and we'll find ourselves in court over this.
House Democrats tried to amend the budget by shifting $81.5 million from 8 agencies to fund pay raises for educators and other state employees. This drew fire from Republican leaders. First House Minority Leader DeVos Porter.
The purpose of that is to do this, is to generate enough funds to increase the proposed salary adjustment for teachers, for school bus drivers and lunchroom workers from 4% to 5%. That can be done in the 07 budget. Also, we can provide sufficient funding to ensure that each state employee receives a minimum of 4% salary adjustment.
I think we need to help you a little bit, Representative Porter. This is the first time you've ever proposed a cut and add. We did it for 10 years, but we did it with a lot of research. We had a Republican chairman in every committee. We met as a committee chair. We put together a very detailed response to the budget document. I've seen none of that. Quite frankly, I'm disappointed that Representative Hughley's name is on this. She, along with my committee, spent over 500 hours looking at the 07 budget. I didn't hear one whimper of this. And you can portray it any way you want. It's a cut to the 07 Medicaid budget. Don't dazzle me. This is the best your hired gun can do, who used to be part of a system I didn't feel very comfortable with. I'd suggest you save your money.
The Porter amendment failed 35 to 117. The House approved a committee substitute to the 2007 budget by a vote of 164 to 3, and now the spending plan goes to the Senate.
The House and Senate today voted in favor of a conference committee report on the $17.8 billion supplemental budget. Senate Appropriations Chair Jack Hill explained how the amended 2006 budget deals with families who no longer qualify for the Katie Beckett waiver, a joint federal-state program that aids children with developmental disabilities.
Here's the plan. There's $7.6 million in the amended budget that will go towards helping the families of Katie Beckett family members who previously met the standard, and then when the state began correctly implementing the federal standard, they were then removed from the Katie Beckett waiver program. This will help those families continue to have services. Secondly, any new family that would have qualified under the old criteria who is now not qualified, this will accept them also.
Now, under stringently enforced federal eligibility guidelines, over 1,700 families have been denied the Katie Beckett deeming waiver in the last year. The supplemental budget now goes to Governor Purdue for his signature.
Property owners could build within 150 feet of streams on their land under Senate Bill 510, which passed the Senate today. Senator Chip Pearson said the bill protects both water quality and property owners.
You have a single-family dwelling on 2 acres or larger. It provides that you may build in that 150-foot buffer, providing that first the local zoning allows that, and then secondly, that the septic tanks lines must be outside of that 150-foot buffer. The second way that you can build in that buffer is for the petitioner to request a variance from the EPD. The EPD is charged in this bill with adopting rules and regs by December 31st of this year that will put in place a procedure for going about this. They also have the very high burden of proving that whatever the variance request is would maintain or improve water quality downstream.
Frankly, this highlights the continuing saga of north versus south, haves, have-nots, water, south of Atlanta without water. I wish I could support his legislation, but I do believe buffers have a valuable purpose. They're part of the remediation, and for that reason I cannot support his legislation.
The stream buffer variance bill passed 33 to 6 and goes to the House.
Senator Chip Pearson is the sponsor of SB 510 and says it is necessary because some residents in his North Georgia district say stream buffers restrict their property rights. Lawmakers Jesse Freeman visited Lumpkin County in Pearson's district and met with some of those property owners.
Floyd Wimpy's family has been in Lumpkin County for almost 75 years. He owns a concrete pouring company. Floyd owns several parcels of land in Lumpkin County, and on some of them he has marked where stream buffers mandated by the Environmental Protection Division reach to.
We got this valley right here, like I say, it's what everybody would want to buy if you was out wanting to purchase something. I say, but if you take the creeks out and all the other stuff, we don't have nothing.
Floyd says there are many county residents in his situation. Dahlonega, the county seat of Lumpkin County, is nestled here in the Appalachian Mountains. The terrain is such that many residents say the most habitable part of a plot of land is often near a stream bed. Of course, stream buffers protect against pollution and rising water temperatures. The conflict is between property owners' rights and the rights of those downstream. Both sides have voiced their opinions in rallies and committee meetings.
We do think that there ought to be reasonable variances and so forth, but let's keep those buffers in place.
We simply need to protect our clean water. We have a lot more population coming into Georgia. We need to be taking steps now to protect our water quality and even enhance it so that it lasts for us and for our children.
Well, I mean, you have people to monitor you around these developments. I mean, if you do your stuff correctly and people monitor you right, you shouldn't have any problem. The
debate will continue on as SB 510 moves over to the House, where Representative Amos Amerson will carry it. Floyd Wimpy says he will continue to monitor SB 510's progress as it moves through the legislative process. Reporting from Lumpkin County, I'm Jesse Freeman for Lawmakers.
In other news, Governor Purdue met with members of the State Road and Tollway Authority today. The SARTA board updated the governor on a plan to establish a statewide traffic monitoring system. The system would create a scoreboard for congestion on Georgia's highways. The results of this study will allow the state to develop plans for high occupancy and truck-only toll lanes throughout Atlanta. SARTA members say the Atlanta commuter lanes could be in place by the year 2030. Plans are also in place for truck-only lanes along I-16 in Chatham County. You may have noticed the governor sporting a mark above his right eyebrow. He received stitches after running into a wall while playing racquetball this morning at Georgia State. He advised everyone he met today never to challenge the wall, no matter what the sport.
Officers of the Georgia State Patrol met with legislators to push a 7% pay increase in the state's 2007 budget. The Appropriation Committee's budget allows the Department of Public Safety to train 50 new officers and hire more patrol office workers. House Speaker Glenn Richardson and other legislators say this year's budget would help make up years of shortfalls. That gave many troopers a reason to celebrate.
Everybody's ecstatic about 7% because 7% probably equals what we've got over the last 5 to 6 years combined.
Yes, sir. I think much like teachers, you do your job because you have a passion for it and you love it, not for the money. But that doesn't mean that we don't need to address pay to make sure that we keep good troopers on the road and that we have a...
President of the Georgia State Trooper Lodge, Joey Brown, also says there are fewer troopers today than there were in 1975, but he says the proposed budget will improve that figure.
The Senate today okayed a bill that would eliminate the requirement that police cars in Georgia display blue lights on top of their vehicles. Senator John Douglas said Senate Bill 64 also had safeguards for motorists.
For the first time, Georgia law will allow for a person to drive to a safe spot if they feel that they're being stopped in an unsafe location or manner. For law enforcement, the bill would allow for optional light bars on top of their vehicles, which are routinely involved in traffic enforcement. Only since 2001 has Georgia law required such light bars. Most law enforcement officials will tell you that the light bars are like neon signs telling motorists to obey the law while within the sight of the police car and then resume their illegal activities once the coast is clear. With SB 64, those breaking the law will not know that a police car is present until they're so close to it that the officer will have seen their activity also.
Senate Bill 64 passed 47-2 and goes to the House.
The House passed legislation today that will alter the appropriations process for Georgia's revenue-sharing license plates. Lawmakers Katie Eubanks is live at the Capitol with more. Katie.
David, there are currently 7 revenue-sharing license plates in Georgia. That is, plates from which a portion of the revenue generated goes to specifically designated agencies, funds, or nonprofits. And today, the House passed a bill adding over 20 more of these revenue-sharing plates. House Motor Vehicles Chair Representative Tom Rice explains.
You can look down at the list at the bottom, and you'll find the Georgia Center for the Book, which is the libraries, children's health care, the Georgia War Veterans Nursing Home. How about Thanks Mom and Dad, In God We Trust, Choose Life, beautification projects in Georgia. Number of tags that have been applied for through this bill. We turn nobody away, Democrat or Republican. It's a nonpartisan bill, and so if you had a tag you wanted on here, we asked for it several times. So we would hope that you could support this bill.
In addition to adding these plates, the House also passed a resolution that would enable them to constitutionally earmark the funds generated from these plates.
On the passage of House Resolution 1564, the yeas are 126, the nays 29.
This constitutional amendment could appear on the ballot as early as this November, and if adopted, the existing appropriation procedure will continue for the current 7 revenue-sharing plates, along with 6 other prestige plates. For the plates added today, $12 of the money generated will be deposited into the general fund, and $10 will go to the designated organization. Reporting live, I'm Katie Eubanks for Lawmakers.
Well, the House today voted to give employers 3 years to collect money from the Subsequent Injury Trust Fund to cover injured workers. House Bill 1405 nullifies claims made outside the 36-month window. Representative Roger Bruce questioned bill sponsor Mike Cohn about whether this would make companies reluctant to hire employees with previous injuries.
The Americans with Disabilities Act actually handles a lot of these issues in that part of federal legislation, so it helps us deal with that issue. But this fund was set up with good intentions, but it turned into basically a fund for the few while all of us pay. And at $1 billion, I think it's time to move it on.
House Bill 1405 passed 154-7. It heads to the Senate.
Senator Kasim Reed held a press conference today to announce a bill that strengthens Georgia's shield law for journalists. He says Senate Bill 654 would help journalists assure their sources of confidentiality in hopes of increasing the flow of important information to the public.
It changes the current law, which allows a member of the press who has a confidentiality coverage under the tradition of journalists to be involved in litigation. I mean, the former standard was basically if you need a member of the press for presentation of a case, then you could pierce the confidentiality provisions of journalism. I think that because of a number of issues that are happening at the national level, we need to send a very clear message on the importance of free-flowing information to the journalists in Georgia. And that's why we brought this bill.
SB 654 must pass the Senate Judiciary Committee and the full Senate by the end of the 30th legislative day, which is Monday, if it's going to have a chance of passing this session.
Well, the legislature was in recess yesterday for intensive committee work in advance of the crossover deadline. As David mentioned, the 30th legislative day is designated as the last day for a bill to pass out of its originating chamber. Legislative efforts have intensified this week at the Capitol because the 30th legislative day will be Monday, March 13th. At the top of the House Intragovernmental Coordination Committee's agenda yesterday was a bill preventing illegal immigrants from receiving public medical care. House Bill 1009 recognizes a federal law that restricts public benefits from undocumented immigrants. Bill sponsor Representative Melvin Everson explains.
The intent is to make sure that public services that are provided with taxpayers' funds or provided to those individuals that are eligible to receive them, we are not denying public service or public health care to any individual. Those services can be received from private clinics, or they can pay for those services.
I can assure you that unless you broadly exempt all health and health-related services, this bill will hurt all Georgians. There are unintended consequences of this bill. And I can tell you that the very first consequence is that you're going to add bureaucracy to a health care system that, in my view, doesn't need more paperwork or more bureaucracy.
No vote was taken on House Bill 1009. It remains in committee.
The Senate Science and Technology Committee recommended passing 3 bills yesterday, ranging from email protection to stem cells. Senate Bill 541 would require emails containing adult material to warn the recipient in the subject line of a message. House Bill 1055 is a mirror of the federal law that prohibits adult material from appearing in schools and public libraries. But Senate Bill 537 faced more scrutiny over definitions of stem cells and how they're handled. The bill would create a state-controlled bank to oversee stem cell research on placental tissue. One doctor spoke in support of the measure but says the state should be careful in setting standards of care for these cells.
Since now there is a provision that these cells may indeed go on to transplantation, which would be wonderful, we should make sure that the care of the cells and the storage of the cells is under the good medical practices, the best manufacturing practices that have been established for cells that might someday go into patients.
Senate Bill 537 passed committee, but some senators say they want to review the implications of human cloning in the bill's language. All three bills now head to Senate rules.
The House Children and Youth Committee gave a due pass recommendation to a bill that would revise Georgia's child abuse laws yesterday morning. Bill sponsor Senator Dan Moody explains the main revision that the legislation would make.
The primary revision in the legislation before you deals with the urgency in reporting suspected child abuse. Today, if a teacher or a nurse believes that a child has been abused, they must report their suspicion as soon as possible. This may be interpreted by some to mean a few hours, or by others it may mean actually a few days, or hopefully not even a few weeks. On page 1, line 23, we've simply removed the phrase "as soon as possible" and replaced it with language requiring that an oral report must be made within 24 hours after there is suspicion of child abuse.
Senator Moody's bill would also make it illegal to alter an initial report of child abuse. Further, the bill would revoke the current law's mandate that children's identities could not be revealed through photographs showing their injuries in court. The bill now moves on to the House Rules Committee.
Two bills that aim to protect Georgia's water resources passed the Senate Natural Resources Committee yesterday. Senator Seth Harp explains the legislation.
Consequently, both of these bills, 604 is intended to protect the buffers, to give treatment, to give a favorable treatment to try to encourage the use of buffers. And 575 is to require the retrofitting of plumbing fixtures such that we would eliminate and would lower the amounts of water that are being taken from the river, and consequently try to keep the volumes of the waters that are going through the Chattahoochee Basin, but all of the river basins that are south of us.
Again, Senate Bills 604 and 575 passed the Senate Natural Resources Committee and now go on to Senate rules.
In yesterday's meeting of the Senate Agricultural Committee, legislators gave a due pass to a measure that would ban the sale of hemp-flavored candy in Georgia. Senator Vincent Fort spoke with lawmakers about why he introduced SB 511 and why the government needs to step in on behalf of Georgia's kids.
Community activists came to me about the law, and they thought that the idea that a candy made with dope, candy made with marijuana was a bad thing, that it shouldn't be available in our stores where kids can get to it. So, and that's why I introduced Senate Bill 511, and we're hoping that it passes so we can send a message to these companies who would put profit before children, profit before people. And so we think that government has a responsibility to say no. We're going to help protect children. Ultimately, yes, it's on many of these issues, it's a parent's responsibility to be the first line of defense. But at the same time, I think that encouraging young people to try dope is the absolutely wrong message we should send to the public. So government taking this role by saying, no, we're going to ban this bad stuff, I think is a good idea. It was a unanimous vote, and I'm very gratified by it, and looking forward to working with my colleagues to make sure that bill becomes law.
The measure will now move to the Senate Rules Committee.
Legislation that would establish a moratorium on the death penalty in Georgia received a due pass recommendation from the Senate Judiciary Committee yesterday. The bill sponsor, Senator Vincent Fort, explains.
Whether one is for or against the death penalty, I would hope that we would all agree that the right person ought to be sent to death row. The American Bar Association Assessment Team's report, I believe, reveals serious flaws in making sure that that happens.
But over the last 10 years, I think it's stunning that while we have executed 19 people, 22 people who were their cohorts on death row have had either their sentence or their conviction reversed.
Senate Resolution 1030 passed the Senate Judiciary Committee by a vote of 5-3. It goes on to Senate rules. The Georgia Council on Substance Abuse held their 14th annual Legislative Day Luncheon yesterday. The event, held at the depot across the street from the Capitol, awarded several organizations, including Georgia Public Broadcasting, for their efforts in the fight against drug abuse in Georgia. Ashley Smith, the hostage taken by Brian Nichols after his alleged Fulton County courthouse shootings 1 year ago, served as a keynote speaker. She has remained off drugs ever since her encounter with Nichols.
When meth was brought into the house and I tried it for the first time, I immediately began to do it, and within a month I had given up my daughter to my aunt. That was 2003, and by 2004 I had lost everything, including my invitation to Christmas breakfast, which, as I think everybody here knows, Christmas is a time where most families ignore some things or get through most problems just for the day to keep peace. Well, my family didn't even want me there.
Now, Representative Jay Neal and Senator Jeff Mullis were also awarded for their efforts in passing legislation last year, which law enforcement says has helped diminish the number of clandestine meth labs found in Georgia.
And finally tonight, in celebration of Peanut Month, Peanut Butter and Jelly Day was held at the Capitol today. Peanuts are the official crop of Georgia, and the state provides almost 50% of the total U.S. peanut crop. Letitia Jeter has more.
Thank you all for coming, and thank you for what you do to put those goobers in and get them out every year.
It's National Peanut Month, and what better way to spend it than at the Capitol with Buddy McNutty, where everyone went nutty for all the different ways you can eat peanuts. There are original boiled peanuts, Cajun boiled peanuts, sugar and cinnamon glazed peanuts, salty peanuts, spicy peanuts, peanut thins, and peanut butter. A plethora of proud peanut princesses presided over Peanut Day.
The thing that I think about mostly is just good peanut butter and jelly sandwiches.
Well, the thing I think about mostly is good boiled peanuts. Probably the peanut butter.
It's peanut butter jelly time.
Peanut butter jelly squad. Peanut butter jelly squad. Peanut butter jelly time. Now way at roll, way at roll, there you go. There you go.
Reporting from Lawmakers, I'm Letitia Jeter.
I feel like I missed out. Coming up tomorrow on Lawmakers, we'll have the highlights of the 2006 legislative reception held by the Georgia Campaign for Adolescent Pregnancy Prevention. And it's the end of another legislative week. That means it's time to check in with Tom Crawford of CapitolImpact.com. We'll have those stories and all the latest from under the Gold Dome tomorrow night at 7. If you have missed any part of this Lawmakers broadcast, tune in tomorrow morning when Lawmakers repeats at 5:30 a.m. Now, stay tuned for Moments to Remember My Music. That's next here on GPB.
And that's our broadcast for this, the 28th Legislative Day of the Georgia General Assembly. I'm Wendy Lawson.
And I'm David Zelski. Thanks for joining us. Have a great evening.
Good night.
This has been a production of Georgia Public Broadcasting.